Welcome everyone to Spoiler Warning. This is in fact the spoiler warning after WrestleMania, and turns out you can actually leave a like on your own stuff. Anyway, welcome everyone. We have a lot to talk about today, and as I'd imagine you're all fully aware that there's some pretty big conversation starters here in and around the good old-fashioned WrestleMania of it all. To go through our headlines, because there are a few. First and foremost, where is The Rock? He did this whole heel turn. He convinced John Cena to become a bad guy, and then he just left. So where was The Rock? We're going to be talking how that came about, what actually ended up happening, how Travis Scott essentially took exactly what the WWE had been planning for The Rock. We're going to talk in that section Rock, Cena, Cody, Seth Rollins a little bit, and Travis Scott. We're going to be talking about the two World Championship matches on the men's side, both produced by Bobby Roode, who unfortunately has not earned the best rave reviews. We're going to talk the Joe Hendry match, how that came about, what Joe Hendry's status is, particularly impending a Cena match, and the fact that we now have Joe Hendry merch as well. We're going to talk a little bit, updates on both the YouTube side, where we're live right now, and the TikTok side, where we're live right now. There's a few updates on TikTok, thank you very much for that heart, Jess, which I think we should be talking about because TikTok seems to quite like me right now, and that's for a reason. We're going to talk the Seth Rollins Paul Heyman heel turn. We're going to give some updates on what the plans are for Bayley, as well as how we got to where we are with Becky Lynch. Very generous, Wavy. I'm trying my best. The filter's really filtering. We will then be talking about Dominic Mysterio, what's going to happen for him now he's the Intercontinental Champion. We have talk of debuts and returns coming this week, including a number of names, some of which you already know about, and some of which I've covered at length here, but some of which you haven't necessarily heard of either. Jeff Cobb, his arrival impending. Will it be NXT? Will it be main roster? We're going to talk a little bit about the impending draft, which the WWE have not yet announced. And then we have an update on what the situation is with AAA. While WWE have acquired AAA, they also have not acquired AAA. And in fact, they do not, at current, have AAA. So yeah, going to be a lot to talk about there. We're going to talk about a couple of people in WrestleMania last night who were trying to make some money from the WWE, particularly as regards Steve Austin and moving vehicles in general. People just really getting in the way. We're going to talk about the roast of WrestleMania, what the WWE were hoping to achieve and how they have failed to do so. Ric Flair and his dream, which is a brand new dream, but a dream that I'm sure you can all guess, but Ric Flair's going to be talked about. And finally, we'll be talking about contracts, particularly AJ Styles and Karrion Kross. So AJ Styles and Karrion Kross, as regards their contracts, we're going to be going over what goes on there in detail. So we are live on two platforms. We're live on TikTok. We are live on YouTube. You can follow on both and of course subscribe. As I've mentioned previously, we also have a little feature called Chat Rate, which if you're able to, please do chat away when it comes to the YouTube side. Say hi to each other. Even if you've got nothing you can think to say, just type the words Chat Rate. It really massively boosts this show, gets more people in, and also then guarantees more like, which means more people who are then saying Chat Rate. That works on TikTok as well, though TikTok is more based on likes. With everything, when it comes to the good old-fashioned world of YouTube, TikTok, all of the social media, it's all about engagement now. If you're hitting like, if you're chatting, we are having a massive boost going to exactly what we aim to achieve. 35 likes on YouTube already, 999 on TikTok, just one away, doing brilliantly. Let's go to our top story before we then catch up with the chat. And our top story, where was The Rock? Well, you may have guessed it, but The Rock is contractually prohibited from getting physical at WrestleMania. The WWE have been in discussions with The Rock for months on this topic. The Rock was eager to try and make it so that his business deals, his movie deals, would allow him to work physically. However, insurance simply will not cover it, and it makes it very difficult for him to be able to take the risk that if he does pick up an injury, he then cannot film. He has to pay back millions upon millions of dollars. It was decided that The Rock would not step out front, even though he was at WrestleMania, or at least there for a strong period of the weekend. This negated the possibility of The Rock supporting John Cena, so the decision was made that Travis Scott would take his place. He would do what was already planned for The Rock, essentially acting as a distraction and allow John Cena to pick up the win. There is a number of other things that they've been working towards. For example, Seth Rollins as the third man. They slowed down what they were planning significantly in order to make room for The Rock's schedule. So what they had planned, what they were going to do, they decided because The Rock couldn't get physical, they would swap it to Travis Scott, and they would slow down booking for every other party. Meaning that we got some significant steps, but we did not see the end result of anything that was planned. Particularly, there's a lot more planned with Seth Rollins, there's a lot more planned with John Cena, there is a lot more planned with The Rock. So we have not seen the end of this. There is plenty more that is going to get involved. As regards John Cena, he is booked for a number of different shows, so we will be seeing quite a lot of John Cena. As regards Cody Rhodes, I suspect this will be a great opportunity for him to take a short break. The WWE are not happy with the amount of boos that they heard for Cody. Cody himself is said to not be too happy either. There is a possibility that people are turning on Cody the way that they did in AEW. So, 2 questions that I have for all of you that I'd love you to answer. 1, did we need The Rock in order to get this match to be as good as it could have been? And 2, as regards Cody Rhodes, are you a cheerer or a booer? Do you cheer or boo Cody Rhodes? I'm going to catch you in the chat now on both the TikTok and the YouTube. If you are just following on one, please be sure to follow on the other as well. If you are just on TikTok, be sure to follow on YouTube. If you're just on YouTube, be sure to jump over to TikTok as well. I do a lot of short form content on TikTok that you may very well enjoy, and a lot of long form content on YouTube that you may very well enjoy as well. So, Everton says The Rock literally turned up a chamber and didn't appear in any of the Europe shows or Mania. Yeah, he vanished entirely after that. Entirely. Jess says, what's Rock filming that's so important anyway? No one cares about Fast and Furious 35. Everything seems to involve Fast and Furious at the minute. The man seems to have a lot of deals that he's not even talking about. Everton says, not to get physical, then why was he involved with the chamber spot? Cena could have done it alone. Could have. It was decided that The Rock was needed in order to sell that moment, and because he was available, they decided to take advantage. This is the same as what happened with Bad Blood. The Rock was available for Bad Blood. The storyline as a result meant nothing, but he was available. Everton says, what's Cena and Jay's plans for tonight? Celebrate. Jess says, we definitely needed The Rock. And it says, I'm kind of met on Cody, to be honest. Everton says, because of the previous story from last year, yes, it was written for him to be in Cena's corner. I'm also going to catch up with the chat on YouTube. There's quite a bit of this, so please bear with me. Juan says, what's up, Tom? Welcome, Juan. Rickan says, there talks of a new WWE belt. John Cena said he's retiring the current undisputed title. There wasn't that I'm aware of. Talk of a new championship. I think it's just John Cena being John Cena, encouraging people to stop believing there's going to be a spinner. Sean says, hi, Tom. Welcome, Sean. Mike says, oh boy, this is going to be a good one. It is a bit hectic, and there are a lot of headlines on this one. So please, seat your pants if need be. Jordan says, evening all, many thanks for the watch parties over the weekend, Tom. Great stuff as always. Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate you for saying that. Welcome to the show. Paul says, what was the best title change out of the 6 title changes? Dominic for me. Dominic Mysterio winning that Intercontinental Championship. It's everything I wanted. KJ says, sounds like a stacked show you have here. I think so. This one may go the distance. It may. And Jordan is the first person to spot, we have a new overlay, guys. Subtle changes. Myself and Si like to make quite subtle changes, but there are some significant ones. Jordan, after all, has just been the first to spot on the overlay that we now can literally watch the pig. Is anyone here watching the pig? Chris says, Tom, what are the plans for Seth Rollins moving forwards? Will he be pursuing World Championship gold? More on that shortly. We do have more to cover there. And as regards Seth Rollins, I have a section a little later. Dom says, what's up, Tom and chat? Don't forget to hit that like button, or we have 5 words for you. You just made the list. Gal says, just like you reported, The Rock's appearance at Bad Blood meant nothing. Yeah, he was available at the last moment. They took advantage of that situation. That is the entire story of The Rock at Bad Blood. There is nothing else to report on it. It was pure opportunism. Jess says, if Mania was earlier in April like usual, would Rock have been available at the time? It seems unlikely because he hasn't been involved in this build at all, but the decision was made to have him involved in no way, so... Everton says, Nikki Bella confirms that the Bella twins will be making a comeback in WWE or just in general. Sean says, according to Corey Hayes, thank you for sourcing, Jeff Hardy was pitched to face Randy Orton at WrestleMania. I can't confirm that. It's not something I've heard myself, and it's not something I necessarily would have wanted to see personally. I like where they've ended. We will have more story on it shortly. 43 likes, 100 people, 2 more gets us to 45. Let's keep that going. On the TikTok side, 2,400 already. Michael says, hi, Tom. Welcome, Michael. Calvin says, hello, Tom. Why do you think fans are turning on Cody, even though I think I have an idea? A couple of reasons. 1, lack of development in his story. 2, John Cena just being a bit more fun. And 3, I feel when we get to the WrestleMania crowd, there is a bit more diversity to it, and people are simply less willing to follow along with how WWE is booking things. After all, you see the response to Dominic Mysterio. It's been a long time since we've seen it be that obtuse, that obvious. But a WrestleMania crowd, the good guys get cheered. Nope, the bad guys get cheered, and the good guys get booed, as you'll recall. Plenty of chat right in the chat. Thank you, Bailey, Aaron, Roy. Bailey again, thank you very much. Mind of Gallant says, chat rate, let me in. Tom says, chat rate under 2 chats, which is even better. Chris says, please no more matches for Ric Flair. We will be discussing Ric Flair shortly. I don't want to, but I'm going to have to. Sean says, Tom, I'm tired of seeing the comments about Bailey being shafted for Becky and that Joe Hendry was buried. Cal says, so glad we got a Wyatt Sicks glitch, and more on the Wyatt Sicks to come. Leon says, hi, Tom. Hope you're doing well. Doing well, thank you, Leon. Welcome to the show. Robin Day says, I disliked the main event because The Rock did not show up. Paul says, what was the best match on both nights? I loved the Fatal 4-Way, but I do think the 2 triple threats take crown and glory, as many of us will have expected. Hello, noob. How are you, sir? Doing well myself. Michael says, if The Rock can't be physical, that means he's not going to do anything at all and not follow through, with anything involving him. Seems so, yes, because after Elimination Chamber, he never turned up for anything. It very much feels like he took his ball and he went damn home. Cal says, I don't think we'll ever see Rock versus Cody or Roman, to be honest. It took them 5 years to get The Rock in for a WrestleMania. Chances are it'll take him 5 again. The man just is forever busy. There's a few cheers there. The rabbit cheers. Ashley says, we did need The Rock. I cheer Cody. Crush says, I cheer Cody. Leon says, yes, and cheer. Noob cheers. Bailey cheers and yawns with The Rock. Ken says, hey Tom, what do you think is next for Liv Morgan after losing the tag titles? I did speak a little bit about her going for the main championships once again. However, I don't think that'll necessarily be immediately. Rabbit thinks we did need The Rock. Calvin says, I was surprised by how the ring gear stood out a bit less. The only superstars that stood out were Bianca, Tiffany, Charlotte, Jay, Damian Penta and Braun. 1, that's quite a lot. And 2, Drew McIntyre. KJ says, I wouldn't say fans are turning on Cody. It's Vegas. They cheered Dom. They booed Bianca. Certain cities boo and cheer the opposing people. Cody hasn't even booed once until Vegas. Razar backs it up. Vegas was a heel crowd, booing Cody and Bianca and cheering heels like Drew and Dom. There's also the possibility that as it's WrestleMania, a lot of people who potentially booed Cody during AEW will some of those people as well. Michael says, Cody looks and sounds too much like a politician for me. Once he does eventually turn heel, it's going to be fun. Cal says, I think the problem is they build the feud around The Rock turning John, and not to see him once is utterly pointless. Cal cheers Cody. Chris says, we needed The Rock. He started this and he should have followed through with his plans. Joe says, Rock was needed and always a Cody guy, worried about the direction he will go. Ashley confirming that The Rock is working on a film with Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio. Jordan says, knowing what we know now, The Rock was not needed in my opinion also. Juan says, I'm a cheerer for Cody, but was it AEW not being profitable, TK refusing to pay him, or the fans booing for his AEW departure? It wasn't any of those things. Trixie says, the important thing to remember about the wrestlers is they're all winners in my... Yeah. Not going to read the rest of that because it's obscene. Everton says, did you watch Cena and Paul on the Pat McAfee show? No, I don't want to tune into Logan Paul Jess says Logan had the 4th longest match of the weekend and I can't remember a single spot from his match. I can. The really terrible styles clash. We will be talking Rusev in a moment, Everton, and says I'd have Braun attack Jay tonight and be his first feud for the World Heavyweight Championship. I might still have a little bit of work with Dominic Mysterio, but I would move them on fairly quickly. Dan says this could have been the same storyline outcome without The Rock. His involvement made the main event lackluster. Joe says, to answer the question, I don't think we needed The Rock. I thought the match was perfectly worked, and as a John Cena fan, I cheered on for John Cena, but I respect all Cody fans. Chris said, why would Cena bring back the spinner? He said, we get nothing, because we're fickle. Calvin says, did you notice how pissed Wade was on commentary? Do you think he's gotten over how Cena buried him in the Nexus? Yeah. Got over it a long time ago, but he was playing the job. Chris says, I was for Dom Mysterio, shocked by the cheer. I was pleasantly surprised. The man's brilliant. Dan's a cheerer of Cody. Trixie does not like Travis Scott. Jordan says, always feel Cody is better in the chase. Ray UK, welcome mate. Oh, just catching up. Says Becky Lynch gets slammed online as Becky Hogan after WrestleMania. Pretty standard. And yet Charlotte Flair. Calvin says all of the superstars that weren't on the card need to be featured more now that summer is approaching. They will be. That is very much the plan. Coach Nick, welcome. Dropping plenty of chat, Ray, and Joe as well. Chris says, what is the likelihood of WWE releasing the roast of WrestleMania? It is planned, but nobody's bought the rights to it. They'll shop it around and then nobody will probably take it. It says Jacob Fatu's US title win was my favourite title change. Rickan says fans are turning on Cody because he's the same character since he's been back. They want something new. The underdog story is played out. Calvin says, I agree with you about the WrestleMania crowd. Just look at The Rock at 18. Anonymous said The Rock needed to be there and the Maestro it couldn't get physical. Bailey says, bear with me 1 second, guys. Bailey says, Paul Heyman was on Pat McAfee's show today. He called Pat out for being buzzed during the show and insulted the crowd at WWE World. You might suggest the guy's gone real heel. Calvin just laughing at Randy Orton. Chris says he's unable to postpone those opportunities and fully commit to WWE. Yes. Cal says, I'll be honest, this whole feud is pointless. Even if he isn't getting involved, he could have come down to congratulate Cena. Sean says, with the boos she's been getting, do you see a Bianca heel turn? I think we will do, and I don't think it's actually related to the boos. I just think in general, she needs a bit of a refresh, and especially with the Street Profits turning and Montez Ford, that makes sense to me. Cal says, an age demographic, isn't it? Like on a Raw or SmackDown, it's probably a high percentage of children to young adults who are more likely to support Cena, where a Mania is more like for Cena fans. And I imagine that was supposed to say Cody in the first instance. Steve says, what I find really weird is that even if The Rock wasn't there, surely he could have had some henchmen who were actual wrestlers. At least then that would do something for the story. There was one, but they pushed that story back. Robin Dave says, my friend was happy that Randy Orton beat Joe Hendry. He wanted Randy to punt him and he dislikes Joe. Tells us, how does Bayley feel about being removed from the Mania card? We do have news on Bayley. We will be clarifying that very shortly. Cal says, Logan Paul does definitely bring eyes to the product in my opinion. However, I think his matches are starting to become a bit boring now. I would like him to face luchadors. Would be better in my opinion. I mean, AAA. It's right there. It's right there. Jess says, any woman who wins a title gets called Hogan by lonely Twitter trolls. A lot of people really don't like women, or at least understand them. Everton says, the matches I would do at Backlash, Orton, Cena, Money in the Bank, Cena Punk clash in Paris, Cena Styles. Well, thank you for the glasses. The Elton John glasses, Jess. I was not ready for that. YouTube is relatively tame by comparison. We have 124 people there. Only the 5 at the minute on TikTok. But I just had Elton John glasses on, so you're missing out. Everton suggests for SummerSlam, Fatu and Cena. Lots of Cena, lots of Punk in that. Lots of Cena, lots of Punk. Let's get to our next story. We will now be talking Bobby Roode. Bobby Roode produced 2 matches at this year's WrestleMania, and unfortunately, his production work is not exactly being celebrated. He produced the Gunter J match, which a lot of people didn't really fully understand the references, and the IWC was very confused. He also produced Cody and Cena, meaning that he was responsible for the low blows, the ref bumps, the overall mess that we got, including the pause before the pin. Bobby Roode's work, unfortunately, is not being celebrated because of it. He's unfortunate in that he produced 2 matches that are almost universally being panned on social media. They just did not quite live up to expectations. I don't think Cody really showed what he could do. I don't think Jay really showed what he could do. The matches were built around Gunter and around Cena, and they just weren't that fun. But a match that was intended to just be pure fun was the Joe Hendry match. I reported previously that Joe Hendry is someone that the WWE want to bring into the main roster and is someone they want to have work with John Cena. However, they don't necessarily want to bring him in until he's under WWE contract. They don't necessarily want to be celebrating the TNA Championship at WrestleMania. However, the decision was made that it was the perfect option. There was a list of names that were given to Randy Orton. Randy Orton is said to have selected Joe Hendry, meaning that the WWE have formalized a buyout. A buyout has been agreed of Joe Hendry's contract with TNA. Joe Hendry will wrap up everything going on in TNA, and then he will come over to WWE, which is why, because he's essentially under contract already now, though it hasn't been finalized, there is Joe Hendry merch that you can purchase. As regards the length of the match, Joe Hendry is still carrying a small injury. As such, it was decided that he wouldn't wrestle for long and he wouldn't wrestle too many big spots. Instead, he'd take a couple of RKOs, introduce himself to the crowd, and then we'd see him later. There was endorsement by Randy Orton, but the second RKO basically did turn him into something of a joke. Unfortunately, it literally comes down to the injury, meaning that he could not perform to the standard that he intended to. Plenty more news still to come. I will work on catching up with the chat before we then go into it. Sean says, every time John was asked a question on the press conference, he said it was a clickbait question. The man knows his clickbaiters. Boyce says, I expected more from WrestleMania, but maybe we were spoiled last year. We covered this a couple of times in the watch party. Last year's WrestleMania, not that good. There was a couple of matches that were fantastic, but actually WrestleMania itself, once you look at everything that they put together, there was a few things missing. There really was. And I think it's a shame. There was quite a bit missing. It just didn't go as I was myself hoping. When you look back, there were a number of matches, Jey Uso, Jimmy Uso, so for example, the Rey Mysterio and Andrade versus Santos Escobar and Dominic Mysterio match that everyone kind of forgets. So I wouldn't say we were spoiled. I think we got about the same qualities we did last year. It's just that the main event itself was a dud, and that gives you a bit of a bad taste in your mouth. I'm going to take this opportunity to set up a super chat goal. Please be aware, no one is required to donate. That is not how this channel works. You can support simply by chatting, liking, or just being here. But I have been for the watch party setting up the lowest possible goal of one super chat for £2 for an hour, and just having it there as a reminder to people that donations are a possibility. If you would like to donate, you are of course more than welcome to, and I'll be grateful for your generosity, but there is no requirement to do so. No requirement whatsoever. So, where were we? Where was I? I was here. Crush says Cody will definitely have a chance to do more character work. I don't think Cody will make the same mistake again, Tim. Whoever Tim is, I'm sure they're reassured by what you've said there. Oh, gotcha, KJ. That makes more sense. RC says it might just be me, but I'm starting to question if Tiffany's ready for the main event spot. There's a couple of people who have questioned that in WWE, particularly given her reaction to Charlotte Flair and the way that certain promos went off the rails. However, they're still confident that she's the right champion. There will be more asked of her in the future to see what she can actually do. Razar says, did you see that cross promo? Was that scripted? He was going off. More on that shortly. Be sure to hit like if you haven't. On YouTube we have 130 people, only 56 likes. So more than half of you, if you can just have a double check, have not hit the like button. We only need 4 more to get to 60. Wrestler fan says, hey Tom, when do you think the draft happens and do you think it gets announced tonight? More on that shortly. Cal says, was Karrion Kross's promo a shoot or a scripted promo? More on that shortly. Also says, I'll be honest, WWE feels like a Republican propaganda tool at the moment. More on that a little later, though I will say there is a lot of people at the moment very, very happy to have CM Punk in the company speaking for them. Koo says everyone was complaining that Cody was getting old and stale and booing him. Now he loses it and everyone's saying they want him as champ again. Explains the IWC in a nutshell. It really does. The IWC, it makes no sense. KJ says, why is it when someone loses they deserve better? Once they get better or win, fans turn or call them Hogan. Yeah, fickle. I think Daniel Bryan said it perfectly. Fickle. Fickle, fickle, fickle. Thank you, Matthew Miller, for following on the TikTok side. We have a lot going on TikTok that we'll cover shortly, but there's a lot of good stuff we've been doing, and I appreciate you finding us. Everton says, what pay-per-view do you think WWE will hold in Australia in October? I have no news on that at this point, unfortunately. Roy said, did you think there were any matches on Stand and Deliver better than WrestleMania 41? For me, Hank and Tank, Stun Fraxium tag match better than New Day versus War Raiders. I think globally the New Day versus the War Raiders is being considered the worst match. Calvin says, wasn't Bianca a heel in NXT? Yeah, she's been a heel in a few times. Rickan says, who's opening Raw, Cena or Jay? Personally, I would go towards Jay, pop the crowd, really get him leaving happy, and finish on Cena. I just think the most sense is that we yeet and then finish on Cena. Michael says, I like Bianca, but it's time she does something new. She needs to turn heel, and that is kind of why I expect that to be happening. Billy says, hello, Tom. Cena said he would ruin wrestling, and he seems to be keeping his word. Yeah, the man's reliable. I believe in John Cena. He said he would do something. He's done exactly that. So I have no complaints. The man has delivered on every promise. Every promise. Michael says, when did Jay turn into a submission wrestler? He hasn't, but I do think everyone should have some submission moves in his arsenal. It's one of the reasons I think the women's division at times is much better than the men's, because so many of the women have a finisher and a submission move. Crush says, isn't Bobby Roode relatively new to doing that? Relatively, yes, and he was trusted with the big ones. Eric says, any idea why Rock wasn't there? I covered that, just rewind, Eric, and it's all there. Ernest Matthews is a big fan of Shane. Free Media says, will you see Rock coming on Raw and explaining why he was not there at WrestleMania and celebrating with John Cena? I suspect not, but I can't say for certain. Ricky says, hi Tom buddy, how are you? Happy Monday. I enjoyed Mania. Good to know, Ricky. I thought overall it was a good show. Thank you, Darius, for following on TikTok as well. I think overall it was a good show. I'm really glad that a lot of the matches were very, very good. The triple threats, for example, were fantastic. Night 1 main event was brilliant, and the opener for night 2 as well. So there's a lot of good stuff worth considering. One thing I do want to say, we had our first time, so we broke a cherry on this show. We had pre-show trolls. Pre-show trolls who said I had to apologise to Dave Meltzer, but wouldn't tell me why they thought I should. Because hell if I know. Who knows? But yes, we had Meltzer bots in. And I let them talk because it just meant the chat rate was gone up. Really can't argue. Cal says, from the Wyatt Sicks message saying we made them, remember that was the message after the massacre and there was new stuff in it. Could we see another massacre? A rebirth, as you will. Sid says, I think NXT Stand and Deliver was better than both nights of WrestleMania 41. Eric says he's set to drop his world title any day now. Once again, pop back, see what you can find. Cal says, in my opinion, I think the Jacob versus LA Knight match was the best match of the 2 nights. Jacob Fatu is the star. It was a fantastic match, no doubt. I'm interested in all of your opinion. All of your opinion. What do you think personally was the best match at WrestleMania? Which match did you love the most, and which match are you going to watch again? Kevin says, I'm confused why The Rock wrestled last year, but this year can't do anything. Once again, Kevin, just pop back to the beginning of the show. I cover in depth why that happened. Cal says, it would be cool to see how WWE reacted to Jacob Fatu's performance and crowd reaction. He's so over already. They, shall we say, ate it up. Ate it up. Thanks for the chat rate boost, guys. Appreciate it. Ricky says, any Wyatt Sicks news, and is Roman gone till SummerSlam? We will be talking Wyatt Sicks shortly. As regards Roman, I've not heard anything about him taking a significant break. Calvin says, I always wonder how Tiffany Stratton, Rhea Ripley and Bron Breakker got so far ahead, yet young guns like Austin Theory and Carmelo Hayes have fallen so far behind. There is actually a really, really simple answer to that. Triple H. The Booker. Khalid says, great to see you again, mate. Welcome, Khalid. And Jess says, both triple threats are my fave. Tiffany versus Charlotte was good too. I also quite enjoyed Tiffany versus Charlotte. CFC says, hi Tom, curious, I think you mentioned a while back Damage Control was going for a repackage. Do you know at least what we may see, when we may see Dakota and Kyrie back on TV? Bear with me just 1 second. Dakota's fit, she's just not being used. As regards Kyrie, she's cleared, but they're waiting for Asuka, it seems. Kevin says, Stone Cold probably says, damn, a lawsuit is coming. One says, according to Dave Meltzer, Ric Flair's AEW contract ends in December of this year. At least TK regrets the signing because he told us last year in March. Yeah, immediately hated it. Squid loving the more on that shortly. Sean says, do you think we get a rematch between Io and Bianca or Rhea at Backlash? I suspect Io will move on and we'll get Bianca versus Rhea. Wadar says, is Bianca turning heel? I would personally lean that way, yes. Paul says, how's the Blue Sky going? Going well, thank you. If you want to follow, it is just linked at the top, just here, where the butterfly is. Steve says, I'm hoping before he retires, Cena gets an IC title win, even if it's a short one. I think it's the only one he needs for the Grand Slam, and him versus Dom might actually be a fun match. To my knowledge, it's not something they're going for, but it could change eventually. Sean says, I think I've been seeing many reviews saying Logan versus AJ was the worst match. Yeah, that wasn't great either. Irish says, sorry I'm late, what's up Tom? And watches the pig. Welcome Irish, no need to apologise. Declan says, I'm so excited that Declan is back. And hi Tom. Few people didn't necessarily want to watch because of no Becky. Well, how do you feel now? Ashley thinks night 2 overall was better than night 1. Okay, Eric, yeah, I've discussed everything I can on that one. Cal says he said it yesterday, Tom, but it felt definitely like Bron Breakker replaced Brock Lesnar. The Fatal 4-Way had that feel of the Brock Lesnar, Samoa Joe, Braun Strowman, Roman Reigns match from SummerSlam ages past. I loved it. I thought it was a fantastic match. And I feel like Bron Breakker has stepped into those shoes admirably. And, you know, it's a wonderful thing. He seems the right amount of pissed off. When it comes to Brock Lesnar, it was the pissed off, or just the piss in general, that really made him a star. Bron Breakker can do the same level of pissed off with just a bit less piss. Michael says, do you think AAA turns into NXT Mexico? I will be discussing that shortly. KJ says the men's triple threat was his favourite. For Leon, it was a women's triple threat. Ashley also loved the women's triple threat. Juan thought the best match was Cena versus Rhodes, but the ending was lackluster. CFC's favourite match for Mania was Rollins versus Reigns versus Punk. Jordan says, for both triple threats were great. If I had to choose one, the night 1 main event. Paul says, I don't see Becky turning heel anytime soon. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Ricky. Thank you, Declan. Roy says, have you tried Ric Flair energy drinks? No, because I like myself. And Bailey says, I don't anticipate a lawsuit with Stone Cold. There's likely a waiver on every front row ticket confirming that the action could spill over to their seats. There is indeed. Thank you very much, Chris, for completing the goal. That is a £2. Gives thumbs up. Thank you to all 5 people who've already hit thumbs up on Chris's donation. Thank you very kindly, Chris. Very generous of you, and I very much appreciate it. I'm going to renew the goal, and we'll have this in the background all over again, because it just seems the perfect way to keep people aware of what we're doing here and what we are trying to achieve. So thank you very much, Chris, for your generosity. Ed says, YouTube mobile is messing with me, so I'm here. I mean, you've got 2 places, mate. You got 2 places. Dev, thank you for following. He's chatting about Sting. It's a shame he wasn't there. Aaron says, is there anything to come from after the Karrion Kross promo? Yes, there's a lot that's going to come out after it. We will be discussing it a little shortly. Thank you, Ed, for rejoining the team, dropping me a heart right on top of my head. Appreciate you. Keyshawn says, El Grande Americano, the next AAA world champ. Let's not joke about that. Cal says, Bron Breakker was absolutely sensational. He is just damn good. Dad says, big up Tom, do you know if any of Seth, Punk or Roman are on tonight? Yes. I am confident there'll be at least 2. Hector says, Tom, long time no see, hope all is well and hope life is good. My work schedule changed a little, but I can definitely tune in now. Also, I was sad when Becky came out because I knew Liv was taking that L. Welcome, Hector. Been a little while, mate. Good to see you. It has been a little while, but always a good time. Ooh, troll. Santo says, where's the Dave apology, Tom? You tried to expose Mr. Dave about his report on The Rock not show up. Did I? When? When was that? Go on, Santo. Prove it. Show you're working. Show your source. In the meantime, guys, another thing we do for the chat rate, say hi to the troll, then say bye to the troll. I'll give him a chance to provide evidence. And if all I get is bluster and garbage, they go bye-bye. Calvin says, do you think they're saving Seth and Paul joining Cena and Rock for later this summer? We will be giving a bit more detail on that one. Chris says, Tom, will Seth Rollins be receiving a new theme song and new presentation now that he's a heel? I don't personally expect it. Keyshawn says 2025 will be carrying Cross's year. Declan has Becky winning the Money in the Bank. Eric, we will be discussing AAA shortly. Lots of high trolls and buy trolls. Santos says 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago when what? When what happened? Plenty of other people were here 3 weeks ago. Carl's already answering you. Says Tom didn't want to report Rock will show. Tom gave his opinion, like you or I. By that logic, I owe an apology. Tom said every single show Rock has been involved in writing, which he has. Thank you, Cal, for clarifying that. Your move, Santo, but I think you owe me an apology. Keyshawn says, why didn't they let Seth help out Cena? Seems to me like they're stalling this one. As I said at the beginning of the show, if you've not seen it, zip back to the beginning. There's plenty you can see there detailing that. And Sean says, I'd like to see LA Knight win men's Money in the Bank. Before we get to the next piece of news, and there is still plenty more to come, I do want to say we will be talking about the TikTok and the YouTube. I'm going to start by talking YouTube. YouTube subs are on the way back up after a little while where I've sort of given the shorts a miss. We have seen the overall number of subscribers dip a little. A large part of that also was the break I took when the WWE was over in Europe. It just would have ended up being, spoiler warning, watch parties. However, what I can say, and I'm going to WWE the hell out of this, the WrestleMania watch parties had the biggest gate in watch party history. I don't know whether it was the goals or what, but I can say a very large amount of you gave some very generous donations, not least a record-breaking $50 donation by Dom. But I want to say thank you to everyone who donated, everyone who joined, everyone who chatted, everyone who kept me company during the WrestleMania watch parties. The YouTube is going in a great direction right now, as is a TikTok. We'll discuss that a little more later, but a big thank you to everyone who's helping this channel to grow. Let's talk Seth Rollins. So, what I've heard and what I was able to speculate before the show was that a Seth Rollins and Becky Lynch heel turn was incoming. The idea being that they could then become the power couple of the WWE. The suggestion is that Seth Rollins is going to be the third man, with Paul Heyman essentially working on The Rock's behalf to back up Seth Rollins. That would be the cost of purchasing Seth Rollins' loyalty. From here, Paul Heyman will support Seth, ensure Seth gets good opportunities, including potentially championships, and that will mean that The Rock will be working to ensure that Seth Rollins is bought and paid for. Seth Rollins and Paul Heyman has been the plan for a while now. As I did say, CM Punk has left more pissed off than ever. He and Roman Reigns still have a feud to come, but Seth Rollins is someone that I thought could not be elevated any higher. This has certainly done so. The fans now will be starting to boo, and for Seth Rollins, there are championships once again in his future. I would keep an eye on Jey Uso, who Seth Rollins might well be watching also. We've got what's next is what's going on with Bayley and the update on Becky Lynch. I will check the chat one more time before we get to that. We're doing really well on viewership, 10 people on TikTok, which is very good. We are currently hosting an event rather than just a live per se, so we got a bit fancy, shall we say. On the YouTube, we currently have 132 people watching. Our peak so far is 143, which is the highest peak this year. That 143 happened, you'll never guess why, because of a troll. Because of the way chat rate works, we had a troll. A load of you said hi troll and bye troll, while many of you were saying chat rate. We saw a huge spike, and we went up from 121 viewers to 143 viewers. So you brought me 22 viewers with a few likes and saying goodbye to a troll. Thank you. Engagement, I tell you. Engagement. Thank you, Everton, for that. I appreciate you. And Everton also says, John Cena reveals he got a hair transplant. Aaron says, is there a new title coming? I don't expect so. That championship is still relatively new itself. Sean says, I'd like to... Oh, I've read that one. Chris says, Tom's only been back 2 weeks due to the European tour, Santos. Cal says, how dare you give your opinion? We all know that I'm not allowed to talk about wrestling during my Talk About Wrestling show. Hector says, also, even 2 days later, still has me baffled. WWE bought AAA. Guess that global localization plan ain't working out how they had hoped. No, and there's a reason for that, which we will get more into. Declan says, it said back in business on Becky's jacket. I did think for a moment it said best for business, but I don't think she would wear that jacket the way that she did. I'm enjoying people laughing at the troll. That's what trolls are for. Laugh at them. Let them know you hate them. Oh no, let them know they're pointless. Kevin says, who produced the other matches, specifically the women's triple threat match? I don't have that news, but I do believe it's available behind a couple of paywalls. Chris says, Jey Uso won't be champion for long. Paul says, are WWE interested in signing any more TNA wrestlers other than Joe Hendry? Yes, they are, though a few of them they're going to give him some time first. Declan suggests Becky versus EO. Now, there are a few chat rates in the chat as well. Kel says, I really, really hope Aleister Black gets a push. He should definitely be in feuds with the likes of Cody, Cena and Randy, in my opinion. Kel also says, now we're getting Penta, Phoenix, Black, Rusev from AEW. It's time to bring Adam Cole home. Baby. They can't bring someone home who's contracted elsewhere. KJ says, in my opinion, Heyman with Rollins is what's best. Leaving Heyman with Roman is a waste of Heyman, as Roman is never here, and Paul is better as a heel. Turning Punk heel should wait. I don't necessarily think turning Punk heel is an option. Everton dropping a hashtag, give Tom credit. Yeah, Everton says they don't believe Tom when he spreads correct information. Yeah, people are only here when they think I lie. Ridiculous. Jess says on Twitter that the women's triple threat was produced by P.T. Williams and Jason Jordan. Thank you, Jess. Appreciate you for dropping that in. Jason Jordan has been working with a lot of the women's matches recently, and he's getting very, very good. Keyshawn says, TK better buy New Japan before WWE get their hands on it. New Japan, to my knowledge, not for sale. Dad says, do you know what Rey Mysterio's injury is? How long will he be out for? It's a groin injury. I expect him to be out for 3 to 6 months. Roy says, who do you think will be Jey Uso's first title defense? There's some good options. We've spoken about Bron Breakker previously. I think that would be fantastic. Finn Balor, I think, would be quite a good opponent early on as a way for Dominic to apologise to Finn Balor, getting him a World Heavyweight Championship match. But, yeah, we have been talking about Seth Rollins. Keyshawn suggests heel Sammy versus Jey at SummerSlam. I don't necessarily think so. Cal says, could you see Ethan Page on Raw tonight? Personally, no. Chris says, trolls ain't pointless as they drive chat rate and bring more eyes to the show. I mean, you're not wrong. We broke a record for the year so far because of your generosity and trolls. Francis says, I reckon it was Becky that attacked Bayley. I'm certainly leaning that way myself. Francis, are you new here? I do not believe I've seen your name before. Welcome. Subscribe if you haven't. P says, no one's saying how good Drew versus Priest was. It was definitely better than I was expecting. Definitely better. Declan says, Tom's right, Dave's wrong. Cal says, I love the contrast in Heyman's face on Saturday. Loves Punk was heartbroken to do it, where he now hates Roman. Roman abandoned him, left him with Solo and Jacob. Roman got what he deserved. Sid said, is WWE interested in signing Sami Callihan? Not a name I've heard. Declan says, could WWE buy TNA? I don't believe TNA is for sale. Calvin says, surprise Finn didn't go back for his trunks for one night. He's another one Triple H is destroyed completely. Interesting. Cal says, get those likes up, guys. We are on 76. 24 away from the 100. We have 132 people watching here, which means at least 60 of you have not hit that thumbs up. Just have a check for me. If you haven't, consider it. Chris says, I'm leaning towards the idea there'll be an alliance between Becky Lynch and Roxanne Perez. And Nick says, women's triple threat was my favourite match of Mania. I really like how their finishes seem to be better protected. Kevin says, how to bring back Bayley versus Roxanne Perez feuds easy. People think Becky attacks Bayley, but what about Roxanne attacks Bayley? Thank you for the confirmation there, Daz. I appreciate you. We're now talking about Bayley. It's time to talk about Bayley because there's a lot going on here. The original intention at the beginning of the year for WrestleMania was Bayley versus Roxanne Perez at WrestleMania. That would have meant Roxanne Perez at the Royal Rumble starting that feud. And were also given us exactly what we did see, which was the call-up for Roxanne Perez. Now, WWE essentially changed their minds and sent her back, but she still had a call-up. As regards Bayley, a number of plans were put in place. The tag team match was originally supposed to be Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross versus Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez. Though with the Wyatt Sicks unavailable and things not really going to plan, Alexa Bliss's limited day contract is something that the WWE pounced on early to make her more available for matches later on. For example, we can see the possibility of Alexa Bliss versus Tiffany Stratton now, which I'm very much behind. Up until quite late in the day, Bayley was going to be featured at WrestleMania. However, then Becky Lynch made it known that she could be available. And that's when things changed. So Becky Lynch returning the way she did resulted in Triple H making the decision to take Bayley off the card. Becky Lynch's return was hotly anticipated. The contract had already been signed. They were just waiting for her to say, yes, I'm now ready to go. And she did a few weeks ago. Becky Lynch is now back, a tag team champion alongside Lyra Valkyria, but I do still personally believe a big heel turn is coming. I think Becky was the one who attacked Bayley. I think Becky's going to attack Lyra Valkyria to take that Intercontinental Championship. We'll then head in towards some sort of Becky and Roxanne versus Bayley and Lyra Valkyria feud before at around SummerSlam time. We get Bayley versus Becky for the Women's Intercontinental Championship, cementing that championship as the up-and-comer. So Becky Lynch is back. I'm very excited by the prospect. Bayley missed out because of it, but I do feel that long-term, Becky versus Bayley will make up for it. I want to take this opportunity to talk about where we are with TikTok. I've actually had to update my numbers already because I put in my script that we gained 400 followers, essentially adding an extra 50% to our total number. That number isn't accurate. As of right now, we've gained more than 500 followers. And we've smashed what was my target for this weekend, 1,000 followers. We're now way above 1,300. We gained more than 70,000 likes and well over 1 million views. Night one alone of WrestleMania, we had more than 800,000 views. This has unlocked some additional features. I now have, and I don't know where it's going to be showing up, I now have subscriptions. And that's something, if you're interested in, you can support. We have a goal set for 1 subscription, so that maybe one day I have 1 subscriber. That could be fun. We are focused quite heavily on the live on TikTok. We are not going to ever be earning money from, for example, videos. And that's not something we're going to do because we're a business account here. So they also opened the option to create events. And I was very eager to see how events played out because I made an event for the show tonight. We got people basically adding themselves and registering for the guest list and notifications. And because it's an event, we sent out a lot more notifications to our new batch of followers, which is why we've had a hell of a lot of numbers in on TikTok today. It's been a hell of a success, both on YouTube and TikTok. And I've got to say, I had a great time hosting a watch party and ensuring that we got plenty of content on TikTok at the same time. Plenty more news to come. We're going to talk Dominic Mysterio. We're going to talk about the debuts and returns that are incoming over the next few days. Jeff Cobb and where he's going to land. Speculation on the draft. The AAA purchase, news for that. The Austin crash, the roast of WrestleMania. Bid on Ric Flair. And what's going on with Karrion Kross and contracts. I'm just going to drop a layer because I'm getting a little too warm. And I feel that's the reason I'm itching my nose so much. because my nose has gone real dry, I'm not drinking enough, and I'm hot. So stick with me while I do this. As I did say, this is going to be a big show. Not the big show, but it's going to be a big show. So I'm expecting this one to last. Ooh. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Oh, well, that's immediately better. Calvin says, is Damien going to be out? Officials came down to help him. That Claymore was nasty. Great match. I don't know as regards the status there. We'll see how it plays out. Declan says, hit the like button, and please do. Sid says, will there be any WWE wrestlers showing up in TNA anytime soon? Yes, there's a number planned to pop over. Cal says, I think we're starting to see the first cracks in Triple H's creative. However, I would ask, how much has he been involved, and has another certain bald man been meddling? The Rock has been heavily involved in this year's WrestleMania. Juan says, Tom, do you have any update on Bea Priestley's future? SRS hasn't followed up since he said she's most likely returning to AEW, and that was 6 weeks ago. To my knowledge, I don't think there's that much interest in securing her services. Sid says, MAGA celebrities were booed out of the building at Mania 41. Yeah, and I really enjoyed that. Alyssa says, do you think Cody Rhodes win back? When do you see him win back? Brad says, my only problem with the main event was Travis Scott. Calvin says, seems the only way for Becky to turn and join her husband is if they lose the titles at maybe Backlash or beforehand. Bam Bam says, will we now see Orton Cena feud at Backlash? I don't necessarily expect that, but I certainly wouldn't complain. Bam Bam says, I saw some report that Rusev will not return as a Rusev Day gimmick and will return as something else. Is it true? A Rusev Day gimmick, to my knowledge, is not being pitched, though they are expecting fans to chant Rusev Day. Rusev Day was a tag team involving Aiden English, who is no longer with the company. Kevin says, I want to know Bayley's reaction when she finds out she's getting replaced. She was fine or mad about it? She was professional. She was professional. Thank you, Jess, for clarifying that. Says, Priest was at the club after his match, so I'm guessing he's okay. Everton says, I'm going to say it, they shouldn't have involved The Rock if they couldn't use him. They didn't necessarily know they couldn't use him, but it didn't seem like it with any likelihood. Aaron says, any truth to Hardy facing Orton? I know Orton had a number of options. I can't say with confirmation that Hardy was one of them. I can just say he's not the one that he chose, if that was the option. Calvin says, what tag team do you see potentially splitting up in the draft? A-Town Down Under. It's overdue. KJ says, AJ Styles and Karrion Kross too. We will be discussing that. Calvin says, I've been telling people about Triple H for the longest time. Cal says, I'll be honest, this WrestleMania felt like a Vince WrestleMania. Outside of the finish to the main event, felt like last year to me. To me, at least. Dominic Mysterio has won the Intercontinental Championship, his first big singles gold, and he is ready to celebrate. The emotions ran wild, and he was told, because the fans were cheering, to run back down to the ring and celebrate with the fans. He was specifically instructed to do so, and Finn Balor reacted as realistically as he could, not knowing what was coming. I'm told that this is the beginning of something big for Dominic Mysterio. The WWE are thrilled with his work, particularly with very little reward at times, and at this point, the intention is to push him harder than they're planning to push Finn Balor. Their intention is to make Dominic Mysterio the biggest name in Judgment Day. And then, of course, as I mentioned, Judgment Day ain't that long for this particular company. We're going to talk debuts and returns. Aleister Black is now confirmed to be returning on Friday. The Wyatt Sicks will be returning. I expect at the very least a vignette tonight as they build back to their story. Alexa Bliss is travelling and is likely to be at SmackDown. Rusev is also on site tonight, and I am expecting him to make a debut. So Rusev, Black, the Wyatt Sicks, and Alexa Bliss are all expected to return within the next week. Rusev is on site. That is the only one I can confirm at this point in time, because the rest I all expect to be making appearances at SmackDown. Rusev may have just travelled down for WrestleMania and stuck around, but I think tonight might be the night. I was asked the question, will Jeff Cobb debut in NXT when he arrives in the WWE? I believe he will, yes. Triple H is said to have not been the driving force of signing Jeff Cobb. Shawn Michaels was. I'm also expecting at least some announcement this week of an impending WWE draft. What I will say, and something to be aware of, Triple H is not a fan of the brand split. As such, he's not a fan of drafts, and he's not a fan of any sort of trade. Triple H wants everyone to be available at all times. He doesn't like the separation. It is Nick Khan who sees the draft as being incredibly profitable this time of year, for what I feel are obvious reasons when it comes to the NFL. So Nick Khan is pushing for the draft. Triple H is not a big fan. I do expect it to be announced very soon. Everton says, I wouldn't mind seeing Dom lose the IC belt then beat Jay for the World Heavyweight. We're not going to push him that quick that fast. Let's calm down. And Khalid says Jeff Cobb versus Obafemi would be good and possibly the only way to get the championship off Obafemi. Chris says, is John Cena going to be a heel until the end of this run? I expect so, yes. If he does turn back, it will be in the last possible moment. Francis says, Tom, what's your opinion on Bayley's current run as a babyface? For me, it's not been that great. I feel she plays a better heel. I think she's been a great babyface, but she's been a great babyface when she's had great opponents. Her work at VO Sky was fantastic, the match itself as well. There are others that I think will bring the most out of her, not least the aforementioned Becky Lynch. So that's personally what I'm expecting. She just needs different opponents. Calvin says, if ATDU splits up in the draft, hope they still feud. Sid says, one of the most beautiful things about pro wrestling is seeing the work pay off and someone get rewarded. That pop for Dominic was incredible, and he's a new Intercontinental Champion. I'm also glad that I was able to successfully predict that he was going to be pinning Finn Balor, because that just gets a whole lot of balls rolling. Dominic's got all the balls and they're all rolling. Cal says, was Rob Fee involved with the Wyatt Sicks vignette? Yes, he was, though he's quite busy and involved in a lot of things at the moment. There's a number of writers who work with the Wyatts on a one-to-one basis. It's not quite worked out what they were going for just yet. Kevin says, what are you talking about? This is Dominic Mysterio's second single championship? What's the other one? Roy says, Kerry, King of Slayer, plays Damien Priest to the ring. So awesome. Taylor Christian says, Cena had high praise for Dom and Logan Paul in his Pat McAfee appearance today. After all, he'd be a heel now. Cal says, just want to say, Tom, I really love the watch-alongs. They were amazing. Glad to hear it. I'm very happy with what we were able to do over the past weekend. And honestly, it made WrestleMania a lot more fun to watch. Aaron says, Triple H showing is still not a big surprise guy. He's not. He really doesn't like that. And I would say any Raw after Mania so far under Triple H has been kind of lackluster. So it's interesting hearing about the returns and the debuts, but there are a lot of people who have always been available but weren't used because there were no WrestleMania plans for them. Alexa Bliss, for example, being one of them, Nia Jax being another. We will see them as quote-unquote returns soon. Kelly says, I used to boo Dominic, now I respect him. And so you should. Where was I up to? Alyssa says, is new on Cody Rhodes? Ashley says, any call-ups after Mania? Yes, that will be part of a draft. Cal says, got to ask, does Finn regret signing that deal? I don't have any news on that one. That would be an incredibly personal thing to ask. Aaron says, Triple H didn't really talk about Cody. Yeah, a lot going on there. KJ says, Rusev had an indie match over the weekend in Vegas. Yep. He was on site for Mania, but he was also involved elsewhere. Cal says, Wyatt Sicks back. We are cooking. Also says, have you had any update on the Wyatt Sicks mask situation? Nope, not at this point. I've given every bit of information I've got. There is a little more on the Wyatt Sicks to come beyond that. And in fact, I'll do it now. Potentially bad news. Stay with me. There are some in WWE who are once again revisiting the possibility that the Wyatt Sicks might not be worth the money that they're being paid. With the draft incoming, Nick Khan commissioned a new cost-benefit analysis list. The names of several of the Wyatt Sicks featured on that list. I don't believe there is any intention of letting them go. I don't believe there is any intention of moving them on. And I do believe there is every intention of continuing to use them. But a new cost-benefit analysis list has been drawn up and presented to Nick Khan. Multiple names of Wyatt Sicks members were on that list. I can confirm they will be returning shortly, which I think will answer any concerns that people have. Paul says Night 1 fell very short of WrestleMania 41 standards with dull matches and stories and a flow that felt very off. All of it was salvaged by the incredible main event that will certainly set up a memorable Night 2. Razar says, I feel like the champions should be brand exclusive and the rest of the roster can float. It would create so many fresh challenges for champions. Michael says, is the hierarchy basically Triple H to Nick Khan to The Rock? Yeah, that's pretty much exactly it. Billy says, I keep reading comments online that those seats on stage are insanely expensive. Terrible seats in my opinion. Yeah. Ridiculously expensive. Gold says, I hope they stop listening to The Rock or his $7 team. Last should be a lesson. Cal says, did you see TJ Perkins' wife attack Jeff Cobb? It was crazy. I did not. Major championship, guys. Come on. Major championship. NXT, not major. Mr. Stumble says, Tom, was Bray Wyatt correct about John Cena all along? Cal says, I wonder if either Drew or Priest are injured. No, but they are hurt. Hector says, fun fact, Jason Baker, who helped Tony Savini with the Fiend masks, also made Jacob Fatu, Rhea Ripley and Cody Rhodes' masks from Mania weekend. Mr. Stumble says, any update on the ATV incident? We'll be talking about that shortly. Sean says, I hope Alexa wasn't on that list. I don't believe so. Paul says, WWE should bring in Scott D'Amore and Gail Kim. They were good at their jobs in TNA. Kevin, as regards releases, a list has been put together of people that they may wish to quietly remove or allow contracts to wind down. I have not said that the Wyatt Sicks are being released. I've not said that. Bailey's worried Kiana James might be on that list. KJ says, how much are they being paid though? Can't be much, they're not big names. But there was a really big storyline that they were planning to dive into that didn't quite work out. Noob says, I do see Malachi Black making his return this week as Melis Miro returns too. Taylor says, Tom, what are your thoughts on Cena going over? We need a big payoff tonight on Raw, or at least something to get another ball rolling. Well, it's WWE. And as regards big payoffs, I don't think you're going to get it from John Cena. I think the big moment will be Jey Uso. Mr. Stumble says, is it a coincidence that ex-con Dom won a title when his deadbeat father isn't there to bring him down? His WrestleMania record without Ray is flawless. Daz, we've already spoken about the draft, and yes, it is. Calvin says, did you see the roast last night? No, I didn't, but I do have a bit of news on it and as to why it happened. Andrew says, hello, Tom. Sorry I didn't watch your Mania watch along. It was literally my mates enjoying it. Hope you had a great time, mate. Also, that CM Punk hype video of Fire Burns theme, I would love that to return if he ever turns heel again. Jess says, concern backstage that Bianca may have injured her finger from Fightful. Heard anything, Tom? I have not personally, no. And concern backstage certainly doesn't confirm that it happened. But I appreciate you sourcing. Francis says, how long do you think Becky and Lara will hold onto the tag titles? Not very long, personally. KJ says, does Nick Khan know what kind of heat they'll get for releasing guys paying homage to Bray Wyatt? Yeah. He's don't care. Cal says, to be honest, from merchandise they topped it for June, July and August and their figures come out soon, it would be ludicrous to release them. Sean says, will it be Malachi Black or Aleister Black? I believe the intention is Aleister. And Sid says, Ricky Saints just looks like a natural fit here. Looks good, looks motivated, good for him. Solid open. The man has a solid opening. Tilly says, I can't wait to see the draft when it happens. More news. The AAA purchase. So, I can confirm that the WWE have announced that they have acquired AAA. However, the purchase is not yet official. Instead, the intention is for the deal to go forwards after Worlds Collide, meaning that technically AAA can still pull out of it. It was expected to become official with the payment transferring in the third quarter, thus ensuring that the WWE, when they post their numbers, will be able to shout about record profits. That's the main intention. Documentation has already been signed, so I don't expect there to be any problems arising of this, and the intention is for the management structure to remain intact. WWE are purchasing the company, but they are not intending to get particularly involved in the running of it. They will make some of their wrestlers available. It will be a loan system that they will be able to benefit from. This also means Alberto Del Rio, who a lot of people believe will be fired as a result of this, there is no intention to make any personnel changes at this point in time. If Alberto Del Rio leaves the company, it will be because AAA want him to. As regards the Austin crash, there were two people who attended WrestleMania last night who have expressed a concern that they were injured by the WWE. One got hit by a buggy that was transporting Jey Uso and Rhea Ripley. They walked out in front of it, and the WWE believed this to have been intentional. The second was in the rough vicinity of the barricade when Steve Austin crashed into it. I say rough vicinity because you want that close. The WWE, yes, when you buy your tickets, you agree to a risk of injury if you are that close. The WWE believe that the individuals will try and contest and argue. However, the WWE legal team is huge, expensive, and basically an unstoppable force. So they don't predict any issues. We have broken our record once again to 144 people watching at once. We already have 464 views on YouTube and 88 likes, only 12 more to the 100. On TikTok, we are peaking at 5,900 likes and plenty of donations and gifts that have come through so far. Thank you very much to everyone involved. Where was I? Calvin says, do you see Matt Cardona returning to WWE Zack Ryder? No. He's been available forever. WWE haven't made a bid. Chris says, The Rock told fans not to believe bullshit by the dirt sheet, saying he wasn't going to appear at Mania, yet he didn't appear at Mania. Yeah, can't he bullshit? Sean says, thoughts on the Tony fumble chance during Ethan versus Ricky. I think it's ridiculous how so many fans are trying to advertise AEW in an NXT show. Why are you going to name drop Tony Khan? You could celebrate success. Instead, you're hating. You're haters. That's what you are. Alyssa says, how long do you see Cody Rhodes get belt back? Good question. Andrew says, surely tonight's show will have big returns and surprises because the last two Raw After Manias weren't the best. They didn't have many surprises or big returns. And that's where I question everything. Because Triple H, not big on the returns. He's really not. Bailey is dropping chat rate towards 100 likes. Erin is as well. Crush dropping the chat rate. Sledgehammer says, good chat, Erin. Sid says, my brain is fried after such a long wrestling weekend for WrestleMania 41. I cannot blame you for a second. Next up, the roast of WrestleMania and Tony Hinchcliffe. Now, I mentioned earlier that when it comes to the non-Republican members of the WWE locker room, of which there are many of them are very happy to see CM Punk being so vocal. As regards Tony Hinchcliffe, this is a man who is involved in the Republican National Party. He has attended a number of their events, and the WWE were recommended him on this basis. They worked with him and paid him a substantial sum, but the WWE were able to essentially put together a very strong cross-promotional element. The hope was they would then find a way to involve Donald Trump. They were hoping that Donald Trump might even attend, or once it became available on TV, he would watch it and comment on it. It wasn't their first thought. Their first thought was selling more tickets. Tony Hinchcliffe assured them that he could do so, and unfortunately for WWE, he was right. So they're hoping Donald Trump gets a sight of it. They're hoping the Republicans are happy with them. And this is part of the continentalization methods that we've discussed previously. The continentalization is an intention from WWE to take their PLEs to many other countries. They were intending to have already announced a PLE in Mexico. However, the change in administration has given them cause for concern. The tariff situation has changed what they're planning to do. And also, they want to ensure that anyone who does have ties with the Trump administration is received well. That does mean potentially keeping most of their money-making efforts securely in the United States, and thus feeding into the economy there instead of the economy in Mexico. We'll see how that plays out, but Tony Hinchcliffe actually directly related to what WWE are doing there. Ric Flair wants to come back to WWE. He is still contracted to AEW, and that's why he hasn't made any appearances, But apparently he's just very, very unhappy. Very unhappy in AEW. He wants to return to WWE, and he's apparently been in contact with WWE about another wrestling match. The WWE are not said to be even slightly interested. Not even slightly. Chris says they give it to the end of the year before Cody wins the championship back. Welcome Ishii says I hope they don't release the Wyatt Sicks. I only watch because of them. Noob says, do you see Asuka returning from injury eventually? And if so, what do you see her doing? It depends when she returns. All of this depends on when she returns. Kevin says, sorry Tom, but F Tony Hinchcliffe for saying Puerto Rico city and people are garbage. I wholeheartedly agree with you. Just as Tony Hinchcliffe has never told an actual funny joke in his life, and also Rick needs to stay gone. Mr. Stumble says if WWE wanted Donald Trump, can they induct him, Vince McMahon, Bobby Lashley and Umaga into the Hall of Fame for best matches? Great payoff. That would be awkward, horrible, and probably exactly what they're going to end up doing. Sean says, do you think Alexa returns on Friday SmackDown? I believe she will. Bailey says, Flair vs Cena. Not happening. No. Rick says, nah, we're good, Rick. No more matches. Rabbit says, you're going to break a hip. Michael says, I remember you once saying that Rick being in AEW was giving Mercedes second thoughts. Glad things worked out for the better. Yeah, they really don't like each other. There was a time when they did. Not anymore. Jess says, Charlotte said she was worried about telling Rick about her divorce because she knew he'd leak it. That speaks volumes about him as a person. Just so you know, there's many people Ric Flair speaks to. One of them, most infamously, Alex McCarthy of the Daily Mail. Yeah, you remember that? I do. Billy says, Rick truly wants to die in the ring. Seems to, yes. Karrion Kross's contract with the WWE is expiring very shortly. And at the moment, the storyline that he's being pitched is similar to that of The Miz. He basically ad-libbed the promo that everybody's talking about, but he did pitch it to the office ahead of time and it was approved. So much like when The Miz dropped his pipe bomb, Karrion Kross dropped his in order to try and get more attention on what he was doing. The WWE are eager to retain Karrion Kross. They believe he's doing great work, but Triple H is a much bigger fan of him than Nick Khan is. I would suspect Karrion Kross may be aware that his name did pop up on a cost-benefit analysis list as someone whose contract they could let run down. Triple H is eager to keep him, and I suspect Triple H will get his way. As regards AJ Styles, while there are good signs coming out, Styles has not yet signed a deal, though WWE remain confident that they'll be able to convince him to do so. Juan says, looks like TK is giving Ric Flair the boot. Yep. Cal says, don't have to read, but Tony Hinchcliffe essentially racially abused Mexicans on his roast show. That's Tony Hinchcliffe. What a dickhead. The other Mike says, so they're basically playing nice so they can have the permission to go to Mexico. Yeah. Pretty much. Mr. Stumble says, any updates on what happened with Nick Hausman? Feels like he disappeared. CM Punk stopped leaking to him, so he had nothing to share. Sean says, Triple H commented about Joe Hendry, said he's a great talent, a great entertainer, and promised him he'll be a part of more WrestleMania. That is very much the intention. Michael says, I watched this WWE AEW review YouTube show. One of the guys was in Vegas and was in the area, an area around Ric Flair. Said Rick looked pissed that Cena won. Interesting. Sean says they should let Scarlett wrestle. Ishii says, get rid of Nick Khan. That ain't happening. And Rick says, hopefully Styles does sign and gets a nice contract before retiring. Calvin says, any updates on Nia Jax? Nothing at this point in time. Now, next, there's a couple of things I want to do. First and foremost, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a link to the Discord chat. So if you haven't already... it doesn't work for me, does it? Let me try it this way. Nope, it's just copied the text. I'm trying to drop a link to the Discord chat. It doesn't seem to want to work. It's hidden and it's not actually showing what it is. Wonderful. Keep an eye on Blue Sky. Make sure you're followed on Blue Sky. And we'll be sure to share a Discord link there at some point in the near future. As we continue, though, please be aware of what we're working towards at the moment. If you want short form content, be sure to follow on TikTok. We are growing at a huge rate there, more than 1 million views over the weekend. Be sure to follow on YouTube as well. We have only 7 more likes on this video to reach the 100. So please do ensure we get those thumbs ups. In the meantime, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone. Our chat rate peaked at 18. Our viewership peaked at 144. Some new records being broken. We've been live for 75 minutes, and at this point, I'm going to wrap up. So I will say, as always, I've been Tom Colohue. You've been fantastic, and I'll see you all very soon. Oop, missed it.